Well, good morning. So this morning I'm going to record, the results of a collaboration between myself and a friend of mine who's also writing a book and AI. And the results were quite interesting and edifying. So without further ado, the appendix to the educated imagination. On the outsider who read Nietzsche in North Bay. So I quote, a reimagined Frye. I quote, the most highly educated imagination is not the one that has read the most books or earned the most degrees. It is the one that has made the greatest effort to remain human in a system that prefers abstraction. End quote. So that was Frye reimagined. And I'm going to speak from Frye's voice. But again, this is my reimagining. If I were to have met Northrop Frye as his student's student, what would his reaction be to my using his educated imagination to inspire a whole new educational reform, not just for dyslexics or hard readers or any of those, but for everyone? So without more abstraction, in the years since I gave the Massey lectures and wrote these pages, I highly recommend, I apologize, I'll start over, but I highly recommend that you go and take a look. These Massey lectures is more than just the educated imagination. They are available on the internet. So I highly recommend you go and listen to these, because I had to read it originally, and it really didn't resonate for me until I actually went and listened to it. So again, the appendix to the educated imagination, on the outsider who read Nietzsche in North Bay. So in the years since I gave the Massey lectures and wrote these pages, I've heard many responses to the educated imagination. Most come from classrooms or libraries, from those initiated in the former rituals of literary study, but sometimes, rarely, like a wild animal appearing at the edge of the clearing, I hear a story that reminds me that imagination is not always educated by the classroom. Sometimes it is educated against it. One such story comes from a student, not of mine, but of one of my students, a teacher of English in Northern Ontario. This student, let's call him Al, was born into the fractured linguistic landscape I tried to map. Not just English and French, but Catholic and Protestant, dyslexic and fluent, outsider and inner circle. He was a child who could speak fluently, but read with difficulty. A child fluent in contradiction, a truly Canadian imagination. He was placed in French immersion, not by accident, by providence. For it preserved in him something the system tried to root out. His oral self, his narrative mind, no chuckles allowed. As others tried to measure him by tests, he slipped through, not as their failure, but as a crack in their machinery, a trace of something the system could not capture. In high school, his dyslexia was finally diagnosed, but instead of support, he was told to lower his expectations, to leave, to get out of the imagination's way. But he didn't leave. Instead, he walked into an advanced English classroom with a book of Nietzsche in his hand, not to impress, but because it was the only voice that made sense to him. Thus spoke Zarathustra is a dangerous book and perhaps a poor choice for a final exam, but for the young man who reads it not to quote, but to survive, it is the most natural text in the world. The teacher, my former student, asked him, "What's that you're reading?" The student answered, perhaps nervously, showing her the thick, awkward translated volume. She smiled. "Ah," she said, "also sprach Zarathustra." That moment of recognition between teacher and student, between immigrant text and native imagination, is what the educated imagination truly means. Not the accumulation of knowledge, but the recognition of meaning, or even the recognition that we must uncover the same. The student was not supposed to be there. He had failed their prerequisites. He had no ticket, no credentials. But he was already more educated than they knew. His education had come from the cold margins, from being broken open by 2 languages, from surviving systemic failure, from refusing to abandon metaphor when only metaphor made sense. He didn't learn literature, he lived it. He became it. The myth and the educated. The myth of the educated and the uneducated. We often think of the educated as those with degrees and publications. But if imagination is the power to see possibilities, then the most educated person may be the one who has had to imagine the most, simply even to survive. The young dyslexic bilingual reader in North Bay is not a footnote. He is the proof of what I argued in this book, that imaginative life is not a luxury, not an elective, not a minor in the arts. It is a necessity, especially for those whom society marginalizes. His story reminds us that imagination is not merely a response to literature. It is a response to life. It is a survival guide. It is our toolkit. And it must be taught, as with trauma, prior to it happening. Not by rote, not by rules, but by recognition. The way his teacher recognized him, because she had once been taught to see beyond surface and into symbol. So survival as metaphor. Canada's literature, I once said, is obsessed with survival. But survival is not merely biological. It is cultural, spiritual, intellectual. The educated imagination survives in places the system forgets, because it has to. The boy who read Nietzsche in French Immersion, who was told to drop out, who taught himself to speak back with myth, he is the new Canadian myth. He is proof that the educated imagination is not an ivory tower, but a burning bush encountered in the wilderness. The final words to teachers. So if you teach literature or speak of imagination, remember this. You are not preparing your students to pass exams. You are preparing them to survive in symbolic deserts, to find language when reality goes silent. Some of them, the best of them, will not look like scholars. They may stumble on spelling or be laughed at for what they carry under their arm. But if they are reading Zarathustra at 17 in the snowy north, do not underestimate them. They are the ones who will carry forward the fire. For those who are almost erased and still chose to read. Thank you, and I hope this finds you well.